A single whisper can ignite a storm. The cold steel of betrayal feels heavier when pressed against your heart by someone you love. Flames roar in the darkness, illuminating faces twisted in fear and deceit. Once trusted allies vanish like ghosts into the shadows, leaving only silence, punctuated by the distant, hollow echo of retreating footsteps. In the blink of an eye, safety becomes danger, loyalty turns to lies, and the life you've carefully constructed collapses into chaos. The enemy isn't a stranger at your gate, it's the voice you've whispered secrets to in the quietest moments. But even amid the ashes, some embers refuse to die quietly. They smolder, waiting for a chance to ignite justice or revenge. Tonight, beneath a sky darkened by smoke and grief, one choice will define everything. A reckoning is coming. Evelyn Carter clutched her coat close as she stepped off the curb in downtown Denver, the cold spring wind whipping around her ankles. 50 floors above her, in the shimmering glass headquarters of Delaney and Sons, her husband, Ethan Carter, was almost certainly in some plush conference room showing off financial projections. She often pictured him there grinning in that triumphant way of his, scanning the room for signs of adoration. She drew a deep breath, letting her gaze rest on the building's sleek facade. That tower was the symbol of a legacy that stretched back decades, a legacy Evelyn's father figure, Richard Delaney, had painstakingly built from the ground up. From the outside, anyone would assume Evelyn was simply proud of her husband's career and was here to offer moral support. They would never suspect that in the lining of her tailored leather portfolio rested meticulously compiled document spreadsheets, coded memos, and quiet testimonies that hinted at a far more nefarious scheme than routine office politics. She glanced down at her phone. No messages. For the past few months, her life had been a study in silence and subterfuge. She'd made lunches, attended charity luncheons, and organized social gatherings, all the while stepping gingerly through Ethan's world of finance and corporate maneuvering. It was far from simple curiosity that had led her here. 15 years earlier, she had been a rising star at a major investment bank before stepping away to marry Ethan and raise their now teenaged son, Andrew. Publicly, she seemed content to handle household affairs. Privately, she'd nurtured her dormant talents, sharpening them with the guidance of Richard. While others saw a dutiful wife, she carried the burden of a secret. Evelyn was Richard Delaney's chosen successor, the hidden heir to Delaney and Sons, despite never flashing the Delaney name. All of it the wedding, the polite smile, the step back from her own promising career had been part of a careful dance. Years ago, Ethan had struck her as ambitious yet genuine, a man with the same hunger for success she once possessed. Over time, that ambition hardened into something else. He rose rapidly to CFO, forging alliances with the likes of Ron Mathers, the current COO. Evelyn gradually recognized that Ethan's outward charm masked a cutthroat zeal that left little room for conscience. Meanwhile, Richard, well past the age of 70, had grown increasingly concerned about who would take over the company he founded. So he had quietly groomed Evelyn. Long before she walked down the aisle, she had begun surreptitiously studying the financial records, traveling with Richard under the guise of family visits, and forging her own hush-hush connections within the corporate structure. Now, she was on the precipice of unveiling it all. She'd scheduled a covert meeting with Richard that afternoon. The original plan had been to wait until the official 50th anniversary gala of Delaney and Sons to announce the new leadership, but Ethan's actions had forced her hand. The old manila envelope in her portfolio held evidence of something called Black Eagle, an insidious plan that appeared to funnel millions from Delaney's core business into shell accounts overseas. If Ethan and Ron had set this up, it was a blueprint for corporate theft on a grand scale, complete with hush payments, false vendor invoices, and intangible consulting fees. Evelyn wasn't just here to highlight fraud. She needed to stop it before it undermined the company's finances. More importantly, she had to protect the employees, thousands of them, who depended on Delaney and Sons for their livelihoods. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," said the security guard at the front desk, a genial older gentleman named Barry, who'd been with the company since Evelyn was a little girl, shadowing Richard in the hallways. He smiled pleasantly as she returned his greeting. If he noticed the tension in her posture, he made no comment. It was likely no secret that Evelyn was more than a mere bystander here. Everyone knew she was Richard's goddaughter of sorts, though they rarely saw her in the role of a corporate figure. Her presence always seemed to carry more weight than your typical CFO's spouse. She took the elevator up to the executive floor, checking her reflection in the mirrored walls. A tall woman in her late 40s, she had a refined yet understated look, dark hair in a neat chignon, a burgundy blazer over a simple black dress. There was no showy jewelry, nothing that suggested trophy wife. Only her wedding band glinted subtly, and she wore that more out of habit than sentiment these days. Ethan had come home late last night again, muttering about budgets and expansions, barely acknowledging her presence before disappearing into his study. The quiet strain between them had turned their once cozy home into a place of uneasy truce. Stepping out onto the top floor, Evelyn immediately spotted Grace Nakamura, the chief accountant who'd once been a dear friend before drifting away under the weight of the company's internal power struggles. Grace hurried over, her eyes wide, clutching a folder stuffed with receipts and sticky notes. "I've been trying to reach you," she murmured, pulling Evelyn aside. "I found new anomalies in the distribution ledger, large sums filed under ambiguous line items. I think it connects to that consulting firm in Switzerland we talked about." Evelyn pressed her lips into a thin line. She'd hoped the funneling was limited, but every new document told a more damning story. The overseas accounts had soared from tens of thousands to multiple millions. She nodded. "Let's keep this quiet until I can talk to Richard," she whispered, glancing around. The corridor was deserted, but Ethan's office door was only a few steps away. A single misstep here, and he'd know they were on to him. Grace handed her a small USB drive. "Everything's in here. I'd copy it somewhere safe if I were you." She hesitated, and her voice dropped even lower. "Ethan has been asking it about who accesses these ledgers after hours. I think he suspects someone's investigating, but he doesn't know who yet." Evelyn felt a chill. "He's gotten paranoid," she said softly. "He might start locking down the system soon." That was precisely the reason for her visit. She had to warn Richard that waiting until the gala might give Ethan and Ron time to do irreparable damage, maybe even drain the company's accounts. If they pulled off Black Eagle, the theft could destabilize Delaney and Sons for years. Before they could say more, the door to Ethan's office clicked open. Standing there, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, was Ethan Carter himself. At 6 feet tall with a disarming smile, he cut an impressive figure, but the polite warmth in his expression didn't reach his eyes. "Evelyn," he said, stepping forward, "this is a surprise. Everything okay?" His gaze flickered toward Grace, who clutched her folder with nervous energy. Evelyn forced a measured smile, as though she were merely here to drop off a forgotten lunchbox. "All good. I just came to see Dad Richard. I mean, he said he had some updates about the anniversary. Are you busy?" Ethan glanced at Grace, then back at Evelyn. "I can spare a few minutes," he replied smoothly, though Evelyn noticed how his knuckles whitened on the doorknob. "Ron and I are about to finalize the China expansion budget, But if you have a question, she shook her head lightly. No need. I won't keep you. I'm going to see if Richard's free. She offered him a quick peck on the cheek, just enough domestic affection to keep up appearances, and slipped away, Grace following close behind. The moment she turned the corner, that anxious knot in her stomach tightened. She couldn't let her husband suspect her real intent. Not yet. Richard Delaney's office was a stark contrast to the modern corporate aesthetic outside. The walls were lined with dark walnut shelves, crammed with mementos from decades of business travels, bronze elephants from India, intricately carved Aztec masks from Mexico, black and white photos from the early years of Delaney and Sons. At the center stood a massive mahogany desk, behind which sat the patriarch himself, now in his mid-70s, but still radiating the authority of a man who'd built an empire from scratch. His salt and pepper hair was thinning, but his posture was as straight as ever, and the quick intelligence in his eyes hadn't dimmed with age. He rose to greet Evelyn, enveloping her in a warm hug. I was worried you wouldn't come, he said softly. You sounded urgent on the phone. Evelyn eased onto the worn leather chair opposite him, laying her portfolio on the desk. She took a moment to collect herself. Dad, it's worse than we suspected. Grace found more evidence. If Ethan and Ron succeed with this scheme, they'll drain millions from the company, possibly tens of millions if they keep going. Richard sank back in his chair. His expression fell, and the weight of his years seemed to settle on him. I've known for a while that your husband was tricky, Ron too, but I never imagined Ethan would stoop this low. My mistake was giving them too much rope. I see that now. He folded his hands. What's your plan? Evelyn glanced at the door, then back at him. We can't wait until the 50th anniversary gala. That's still weeks away. They're already accelerating the siphoning. We risk them pulling the trigger on this Black Eagle plan any day. She explained how the shell companies appeared to be funneling funds into Swiss accounts under newly minted corporate entities. We need to announce the change of leadership sooner, maybe even next week, or at least lock down the accounts. Richard grimaced. An early announcement would create shockwaves in the market and inside the company. If we do that without ironclad proof, Ethan and Ron could claim we're staging a baseless coup. You know how vicious corporate lawyers can get. He lifted an old photograph from his desk, showing a younger version of himself with Evelyn perched on his shoulders. But I also can't let these criminals ruin what I've built, not to mention what you've been preparing for all these years. Evelyn felt a twinge of nostalgia as she looked at that photo. She was barely 8 years old, losing her father to a factory explosion. Richard had stepped in then, eventually becoming a paternal figure who nurtured her talent in finance. He taught her to see business not just as a profit machine, but as a responsibility to community and employees. Those lessons were the backbone of who she was. We have evidence, Dad, she pressed gently, retrieving the USB drive from Grace. A lot of it. This can't be dismissed as rumor. He took the USB with a grave nod. I'll have my personal legal team review it discreetly. If there's enough to freeze their operations, we will. But you need to be ready the moment we confront them. All hell will break loose. And if you're taking the reins, you'll be the lightning rod. Evelyn exhaled, bracing herself for the storm she knew was coming. I've been ready for this for a long time. The only question is how to minimize collateral damage. I don't want the employees to suffer, or the stock to crash. A long silence settled over them. Richard tapped a pen on his desk. Thinking. Finally, he said, give me 48 hours. I'll have the team validate this evidence. Then we'll proceed, quietly, if possible, but decisively. He glanced at his phone. In the meantime, be careful. If Ethan suspects you know, things might get tense. As Evelyn stood to leave, Richard's voice turned softer. You've sacrificed a lot for this company. Evelyn, more than most people realize. I'm sorry you have to fight your own husband, but if it comes down to it, you have my full support. We'll do this together. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She forced a smile, though part of her felt hollow. Ethan wasn't always the villain in her life story, but something about greed and ambition had twisted him, and now they were nearing the point of no return. Evelyn's next stop was the sub-basement parking garage, an unremarkable space of concrete pillars and echoing footsteps. The hush here always unnerved her, as if secrets hid in every shadow. She was supposed to meet Grace briefly off the books to go over more details about the Swiss accounts, but the air felt off the moment she stepped out of the elevator. It was too quiet, too still. She scanned the area, searching for Grace's silver sedan. Instead, she found Grace kneeling on the ground beside a toppled stack of boxes near the service door. Rushing over, Evelyn's heart hammered. Grace was breathing hard, eyes wide with fear, clutching her wrist. Someone just ran up behind me. Grace stammered. They snatched the folder I had and shoved me. I think I sprained my wrist. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Did you see who it was? Grace shook her head, panic etched into her features. No, they wore a hood or something. Tall, male, maybe? She winced, trying to stand. Evelyn offered a hand. They must have followed you. The folder, what was in it? Tears sprang to Grace's eyes. Paper copies of the newly uncovered invoices, confirmations of wire transfers, hard evidence. I was bringing them to you? Evelyn helped her upright. Her pulse was thudding in her ears. Okay, calm down. We still have the digital copies, right on that USB. Grace nodded, but fear lingered. I worry they might do worse next time. If they know I'm involved, Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on Grace's shoulder. We'll keep you safe. We'll alert Richard and maybe get you some protection. She glanced around, wishing she'd brought someone else with her. The security cameras in the garage might have caught something, but she wasn't sure who was controlling them. If it was Ethan or Ron's people, they could be erased. Just then, footsteps echoed from the far side of the garage, and Evelyn froze. A figure approached one of the building's security guards, a muscular man with a buzz cut. Everything okay here? His tone was neutral, but Evelyn noted how his gaze flicked to Grace's disheveled state. Yes, Evelyn replied, forcing composure. Someone attacked my friend, but they ran off. Could you check the security cameras? The guard gave a brief nod, though his expression remained cautious. Of course, ma'am. I'll radio it in. Grace was trembling, so Evelyn guided her to her car. Go to the ER. Get that wrist checked. Don't worry about the missing folder. We'll figure something out. Inside, though, Evelyn's anger and anxiety roiled. This wasn't a random mugging. Someone wanted that folder gone, possibly one of Ethan's hired hands, or maybe Ron's. The stakes had just escalated, and it was only a matter of time before Ethan realized his wife was involved in more than philanthropic fundraisers. As Grace pulled away, Evelyn leaned against a cold concrete pillar, letting the tension settle into her bones. She was used to strategy and numbers, not physical confrontations, yet here she was, in a dark parking garage, dealing with an assault. The thought of going home to the same roof as Ethan that night churned her stomach. She had to keep acting like nothing was amiss while quietly accelerating the plan. They needed to protect their allies, secure the evidence, and neutralize Ethan and Ron's entire operation. She glanced at the elevator doors, imagining Ethan stepping out with that confident smirk. For the first time in her life, Evelyn felt a strange combination of fear and resolve, fear for what he might do next, and resolved that she would not let him destroy Richard's legacy or her own sense of justice. That evening at the Carter residence, dinner was a tense affair. Their teenage son, Andrew, sat between his parents, oblivious to the currents swirling beneath the polite conversation. Evelyn had made grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, one of Andrew's favorites, hoping to keep up a semblance of normalcy. Ethan, however, barely touched his plate, flipping through emails on his phone. "Dad, can we go fishing next weekend?" Andrew asked, cutting into his salmon. He was a thoughtful boy, 16 years old, and nearing that point where teenage cynicism often collided with the desire to be guided by a father figure. "You promised we'd hit the lake before your schedule got crazy." Ethan glanced up from his phone, giving Andrew a perfunctory smile. "Sure, champ. I'll try to clear a day. Work's hectic right now." His eyes flicked toward Evelyn. She hadn't said much since he arrived home. He noticed, but seemed uncertain about how to probe. "Evelyn, how was your day? You were at the office, right?" She met his gaze calmly, as if rehearsed. "Yes, I went to see your father Richard about the anniversary event. Just the usual planning details." She kept her tone light, though her mind raced with the memory of Grace's attack in the garage. "Uh-huh," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. He offered no further questions, as though the mention of Richard's name cut too close. Andrew fiddled with his fork. "Mom, can you pass the salt?" The teenager obviously felt the tension in the air, but couldn't quite place it. Evelyn passed the salt, internally acknowledging that Andrew was the one bright spot in her life. She hated how this corporate battle might spill into their domestic sphere, risk overshadowing his childhood. She forced a cheerful note into her voice. "So, I'm thinking we rent a cabin by the lake if your dad can get free. Make a weekend out of it." Ethan cleared his throat, setting his phone aside. "I'll see what I can do. But next weekend might be tight. Ron and I have some big deadlines for the China expansion." His eyes flicked toward Evelyn again, a subtle challenge in them. "You sure you're not too busy with charity events?" It was a jab, almost an accusation that she was meddling in his professional realm. She offered a thin smile. "I can always rearrange my schedule. Family first, right?" He nodded, but the small muscle in his jaw tightened. Evelyn recognized that he was trying to read her. Perhaps he sensed she knew something. The conversation limped along until Andrew excused himself to catch up on homework, leaving the couple alone. The moment their son's footsteps receded upstairs, Ethan's facade of polite calm vanished. "You're sure you only spoke with Richard about the gala?" he asked pointedly. Setting his napkin on the table, Evelyn maintained an even tone. "Yes, what else would we talk about?" He studied her, the tension thickening the air. "Someone tried to access sensitive budget documents today. It flagged it. I was wondering if that had anything to do with your visit." His voice held a controlled edge. Evelyn lifted her glass of water to her lips, taking a measured sip. "Budget documents, I wouldn't know where to begin. I'm just the spouse of the CFO, remember?" She let a hint of sarcasm color the last words, hoping it would deflect his suspicion. Ethan forced a laugh, but it fell flat. "Right, just the spouse." He pushed back from the table, collecting his phone. "I've got a conference call with Ron. Don't wait up." She watched him go, heart pounding. This was the start of a new phase one, where they both circled each other warily, each aware of the other's secrets, but pretending to keep a veneer of marital cooperation. Tonight, she would sleep fitfully, half expecting Ethan to confront her with proof of her own snooping. But she also felt that quiet fire inside, fueled by the image of Grace on the garage floor, by the betrayal etched on Richard's face. Ethan and Ron had taken the game too far, and she wasn't backing down. By dawn, Evelyn was awake, pulling on running shoes for her 6 a.m. jog. She needed an outlet, a way to clear her mind. Long, pounding runs through the still sleepy suburbs served that purpose. As she jogged past neat lawns and morning paper deliveries, she sorted through everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Grace's assault, the missing folder, Ethan's prying questions. The same thought looped through her mind: she needed more backup. After her run, she texted an old friend, "We need to talk, urgent." The friend in question was a former Marine named Daniel Briggs, now working private security. Years ago, Daniel had handled protective details for Delaney and Sons' top executives, including Richard. Evelyn had kept in touch with him, occasionally leaning on his expertise whenever she suspected corporate espionage. This time, though, she needed help with something more concrete, ensuring Grace's safety, possibly even watching Ethan and Ron. Her phone buzzed before she finished showering. The message from Daniel read, "Meet me at the Roasted Bean on Chapman at 9. Good. She needed an ally who understood how to protect people from unscrupulous suits. By 8:45, she had left Andrew a note about running errands and was cruising down the wide boulevard toward the cafe. She parked near the back, scanning for any sign of watchers. Ever since Grace's attack, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be tailing her. Inside, the air smelled of espresso and fresh pastries, and Daniel was waiting at a corner table, his muscular frame making the cafe chairs look almost child-sized. He rose, offering a firm handshake. "Been a while, Evelyn. You look good, though you seem stressed." He studied her face, still dealing with Delaney and Sons drama. "I take it?" She slid into the seat, exhaling. "You could say that. I need off-the-record security help. A friend of mine was attacked. Data was stolen. Might need surveillance, someone to watch certain people." Daniel laced his fingers, leaning forward. "I recall from the old days that you always had an inside track at Delaney. But if you're telling me your friend was physically assaulted, this is more than corporate politics. Who are we dealing with?" Evelyn hesitated, stirring her coffee. She decided to trust Daniel enough to reveal partial truths. "My husband, Ethan, and the COO, Ron Mathers, may be diverting funds to foreign shell accounts. If they suspect anyone's onto them, they've shown they can get violent. I need to ensure the key witnesses like Grace are safe until we can finalize the evidence." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "This husband of yours? Why's he crossing lines like that?" She sighed. "Ambition? Greed. Hard to say when it all started. My father figure. Richard wants me to take over the company legitimately, but these guys are scurrying to strip assets. It's messy." She glanced around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "I'm also worried they might target me or my son." Daniel nodded, expression darkening. "All right, here's what I can do. I can set up a rotating detail to watch your friend Grace. Make sure nobody gets close to her. I can also run a background check on Ron and any other co-conspirators. As for watching your husband, that's trickier. Marital privacy laws can complicate things." Evelyn managed a small smile. "We're past privacy. If he's committing fraud, I can't stay silent. But I need to do this by the book. If the evidence was gained illegally, they'll turn it around on us." Daniel shrugged. "Understood. I'll keep it discreet. You'll pay me out of your personal funds." She nodded. "Yes, I have access to a trust Richard set up for me years ago. Don't worry about that." He jotted notes on a small notepad. "Fine. I'll send you a secure link later so you can upload any documents that might help me see the big picture. Let me know about any places you suspect they're funneling money, or folks who might be on their payroll." Evelyn felt a wave of relief. At least she wasn't alone in this anymore. "Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it." She glanced at the time. She'd need to hurry if she didn't want to raise Ethan's suspicions by returning home too late. "Let's stay in close contact. Things might escalate soon. With that, she left the cafe, a small knot of tension easing. She still had to maintain her facade as the dutiful wife, but now a former Marine was in her corner, and that felt like a significant step forward in the war she was waging behind carefully closed doors. 2 days later, Evelyn found herself in the hushed corridors of Dr. Ramirez's private clinic. She hadn't planned on stepping into a doctor's office today, but Grace's anxiety had spiked, and the wrist injury from the garage attack wasn't improving. Fearing another ambush at a public hospital, Grace had insisted on going somewhere more discreet. Evelyn had offered to drive, partly to keep her friend's spirits up, partly to ensure no suspicious watchers followed Grace. As the nurse led Grace away for an x-ray, Evelyn checked her phone. A single text from Richard confirmed everything. "We're moving faster." "You up for it?" She typed back. Yes, her heart jolting. If Richard had validated the evidence, it meant they might freeze certain accounts imminently. That also meant Ethan and Ron's window to execute Black Eagle was slamming shut, making them more dangerous. She settled into one of the plush waiting room chairs, crossing her legs, trying to project calm. Outside, the sky was overcast, a dull gray that matched her mood. The only other occupant was an older man reading a tattered magazine, presumably waiting for his own appointment. A nearby TV mutedly showed some morning talk show about home renovations, anything to distract from the hush of medical anxiety. Evelyn found none of it comforting. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel. Intel found Ethan's been in contact with a Swiss-based firm called Helios Advisors. They're not on record with Delaney. Checking deeper. Evelyn inhaled sharply. So the swirl of secret accounts was real, and it had a name. Helios Advisors. She typed back, "Look into Ron's dealings with them too." Just then, she noticed the older man stand up. He glanced her way, then shuffled to the door and stepped outside. Her instincts prickled. That might be nothing, but paranoia was second nature now. She kept an eye on the empty corridor. Sure enough, about a minute later, the man re-entered, his glance lingering on her. She pretended to scroll through emails, but she was acutely aware that he might be another tail, hired to watch her movements. 10 minutes crawled by. Eventually, Grace emerged with a bandaged wrist, the nurse carrying a small bag of prescriptions. "Hairline fracture," Grace said with forced cheer. Evelyn stood, concerned. "Are you okay to stay alone, or do you want me to drop you at your sister's?" Grace looked around, noticing the man still in the waiting area. "Sister's place might be best. She has room, and it's a gated community. I'll feel safer." Evelyn guided her friend out to the parking lot. The older man followed a moment later, glancing at his phone, seemingly aimless. Evelyn locked eyes with Daniel, who was leaning against his black SUV parked discreetly nearby. She had arranged for him to trail them as extra security. A silent nod passed between them. If the older man was a spy, Daniel would handle it. Inside the car, Grace exhaled shakily. "I hate living like this, always looking over my shoulder." She clutched her bandaged wrist. "If it wasn't for you, I'd have quit and moved out of state." Evelyn put a reassuring hand on Grace's knee. "Hang in there. We're close to shutting them down. Richard is finalizing steps to safeguard the company's funds. Once that's done, Ethan and Ron can't retaliate by siphoning money anymore." Grace nodded, tears brimming. "And you? Are you okay?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. She realized she hadn't paused to consider her own emotional toll. "I will be," she replied, starting the engine. "We just have to get through this last stretch." She glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Daniel's SUV pulling out behind them, trailing at a safe distance. The drive to Grace's sister's house was tense but uneventful. The older man from the waiting room was nowhere in sight, and Evelyn prayed Daniel had deterred him. As they navigated the tree-lined streets of a gated community, Evelyn felt a pang of envy. At least Grace could escape to family. Evelyn was going home to a husband who might be orchestrating the entire fiasco. She steadied herself with the knowledge that soon she wouldn't have to pretend. Soon, the truth would break free, and Ethan would have to face whatever consequences came his way. That night, Evelyn was in the den, carefully reviewing the latest bank statements Grace had salvaged from the finance department. The hours ticked by as she cross-referenced them with the coded line items Grace had discovered. Some of the money had been funneled through Helios advisors, just as Daniel's tip suggested. It confirmed the Swiss link, and she was dangerously close to seeing how the entire puzzle fit together. A single overhead lamp cast long shadows on the walls, intensifying the hush. Midnight approached, and Ethan was still not home. She tried to quell the uneasy swirl in her stomach, telling herself that corporate CFOs worked late, but the deeper fear was that he might be rushing to finalize Black Eagle, shifting funds before Richard locked the accounts. She scribbled notes to 3M Helios Advisors, 1.7M Aurora Consulting, cross-check with budgets for R&D expansions. Her phone vibrated, startling her. The screen showed unknown number. She answered tentatively, half expecting Daniel or Richard calling from a secure line. Instead, a voice she recognized immediately, Ron Mathers. Evelyn, came his smooth baritone. I trust you're having a good evening. Her heart jumped. It's late. Ron, what is this about? He gave a low chuckle. I figure we should talk. Given that you're apparently rifling through accounts that aren't your concern. See, I prefer we keep these things within the family, so to speak. For Ethan's sake. Evelyn's breath caught. This was a direct threat, unmasked. I'm not sure what you're referring to. He laughed again, a condescending sound. Let's not play games. You've been sneaking around with Grace, rummaging in ledgers you have no business reading. Maybe you think Richard will crown you queen, but that won't happen if the board hears certain stories about you, like misappropriating funds from the philanthropic accounts. Might tarnish your spotless reputation. She stiffened. That was pure fabrication, but she knew how rumors twisted truth. You're bluffing, she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. No one would buy that. Would they? Ron said casually. You're not even a formal employee. And the CFO's wife meddling in finances, who do you think the board will believe? The established COO or the socially active spouse? Evelyn's grip tightened on her phone. If you lay a finger on Grace again, or anyone else, you'll regret it. I have evidence you and Ethan are siphoning millions. Ron fell silent for a second, then spoke in a low hiss. Evidence can disappear, and people can, too. The line went dead. She sat there shaking, anger and fear sparking in equal measure. Ron Mathers had just threatened her directly. She quickly opened a secure chat app to relay the call's contents to Daniel and Richard, let them know exactly how brazen Ron was getting. She also typed, "We need to accelerate. Ron is on to me. They might try to frame me soon." Exhaustion weighed on her, but she couldn't rest. Every minute that passed was one more chance for them to bury evidence, intimidate witnesses, or rewire financial lines. She returned to the spreadsheets, her eyes burning, determined to find the final link that would bury Ethan and Ron's scheme. A wave of sorrow passed through her. She'd loved Ethan once, or believed she did, but betrayal was now the bedrock of their relationship, and there would be no going back. The following morning, Evelyn awoke to the sound of Andrew arguing with Ethan in the hallway. She grabbed a robe and hurried out of the bedroom. Andrew stood at the top of the stairs, red-faced, while Ethan loomed over him. All I said was, "You promised to come to my track meet." Andrew's voice cracked with frustration. "You keep bailing on me, Dad." Ethan rubbed his temple as though battling a headache. "I have to leave on a business trip." "Andrew, I can't just skip important meetings. This is how I provide for you." Evelyn intervened, gently placing a hand on Andrew's shoulder. "What business trip?" she asked Ethan. She had checked his schedule. There was no mention of travel. He turned that distant stare on her. "It came up overnight. Ron needs me in Chicago to meet with potential investors for the China deal." Andrew scoffed. "Right, always last minute, whatever." He stomped down the stairs, leaving Evelyn with Ethan. She noticed how his tie was askew, and the jacket on his arm seemed hastily thrown on. It was unlike him. Ethan was always precise in his appearance. "What's really going on?" she asked, voice low. "Why the sudden trip?" Ethan's gaze narrowed. "It's none of your concern." Then he caught himself, forcing a calmer tone. "I mean, it's just a short meeting. I'll be back tomorrow." Her mind churned. This had to be about Black Eagle. Maybe he was finalizing the last wire transfers. She carefully prodded. "You seem stressed. Does it have something to do with the board's rumored changes?" He stilled. "What do you mean, changes?" She shrugged. "You know, Richard is retiring soon. People are talking about who might fill the leadership vacuum." She paused, watching for his reaction. "I just hope you're not doing anything reckless." Ethan released a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "I've sacrificed more for Delaney and Sons than you'll ever know. If I have to play hardball to secure our future, I will." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Don't test me, Evelyn. You may be Richard's pet, but I've got my own allies." For a moment, she thought he might raise his hand or lash out. Instead, he spun away, stalking down the hall to the garage. Oiten. The door slammed behind him, leaving her alone, heart pounding. She hurried to the living room window and watched him pull out of the driveway, tires squealing. Part of her hoped Daniel was tailing him, though it wouldn't stop Ethan from sealing whatever dirty deals he'd planned in Chicago. Andrew reemerged from the kitchen, grabbing his backpack. "Dad's such a jerk sometimes," he muttered. "Why does he even promise to come if he's not going to show?" Evelyn's heart broke at the hurt in her son's eyes. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "He's under a lot of pressure. I know it's no excuse, but let's just focus on your meet. I'll drive you today and cheer the loudest." "Okay." Andrew softened. "Thanks, Mom." But as he headed out, she saw the disappointment etched into his posture. In that moment, Evelyn resolved that once she exposed Ethan, she would do everything in her power to shield Andrew from the fallout. She wouldn't let the sins of the father define the son's future. She took a deep breath and texted Richard. Ethan left abruptly, possibly to finalize funds. "We need to move soon." She also texted Daniel, "Track him if possible." Chicago flight. With that, she launched into her day, determined to maintain normalcy for Andrew while the ticking clock of betrayal counted down in her mind. Late that afternoon, Evelyn was in the stands at Andrew's high school track meet, clapping and cheering with the other parents. The crisp air smelled of fresh-cut grass and teenage adrenaline, a world apart from corporate boardrooms and Swiss shell accounts. Andrew did well in the 400-meter dash, placing second. Evelyn leaped to her feet, shouting his name. For a brief moment, she forgot about spreadsheets and double dealings, just bursting with maternal pride as Andrew crossed the finish line. When he jogged over, sweat beading on his brow, Evelyn handed him a water bottle. "Great job, champ." That was so close, he gulped down water, smiling sheepishly. "If Dad sees the video, maybe he'll—" "Well, never mind." She ruffled his hair, forcing a reassuring grin. "He'll watch it, I promise." But her heart sank. knowing Ethan's mind was likely on forging deals that could ruin the company. Still, she was determined to give Andrew this sense of normality. He deserved that. After the meet, they grabbed fast food on the drive home. Andrew chatted about upcoming meets, complaining about a tough math teacher. Evelyn listened, savoring these fleeting moments of an ordinary life. The tension within her eased, if only for an hour, as she focused on her son's laughter. As they approached the house, she noticed a dark sedan idling across the street, its windows tinted. A flicker of apprehension pulsed in her. She parked in the driveway, glancing over her shoulder. The sedan pulled away as soon as she stepped out. Probably just a neighbor or random stranger, she told herself, but her gut said otherwise. Inside, Andrew headed straight for the shower. Evelyn double-checked the locks, then walked down the hall, peering into Ethan's study. It was exactly as he left it, papers scattered. The computer shut down. She clicked it on, the screen flashing a password prompt. She had no illusions about hacking into her husband's computer. He was meticulous about security, but she wondered if he'd left any clues in the open. Stacks of spreadsheets for the China expansion lay on the desk, just the normal stuff any CFO might have. No sign of anything labeled Black Eagle. Then her eyes fell on a small slip of paper, a printout of flight details. Chicago to Zurich. Next week? That wasn't just a short business hop. Was he planning to bolt out of the country after finishing whatever final arrangement he was cooking up in Chicago? She quickly snapped a photo of the printout with her phone. Andrew's footsteps sounded upstairs, so she switched off the monitor and slipped out, heading to the kitchen to start dinner. Her mind raced. If Ethan was traveling to Zurich, that might be the final stage, personally ensuring the Swiss accounts were set up and funded, possibly meeting Helios advisors in person. As she chopped vegetables, Andrew ambled in, hair damp from the shower, phone in hand. "Mom, I'm gonna text Dad my time from today," he said, typing away. Evelyn offered a tight smile. "Good idea. He'll be proud of you, sweetheart." But inside, her anger simmered. Ethan was about to commit grand larceny against Delaney and Sons, and he couldn't be bothered to watch his son run. She forced down the bitter taste of betrayal and focused on preparing dinner, each knife stroke a small release of the tension binding her. By the next day, Richard's legal team had worked overtime. A wave of relief and apprehension hit Evelyn's phone in the form of a single text from Richard. Evidence conclusive. Board meeting set for Friday morning. Be ready. She reread it 3 times, feeling her pulse quicken. Friday morning was only 2 days away. That was the moment he planned to confront Ethan and Ron, officially calling for a freeze on the suspicious accounts and revealing the leadership transition they'd been planning. In her living room, Evelyn paced, phone in hand. The final move was coming much sooner than expected. She typed back, "I'll inform Daniel. We'll ensure safety. But are you sure we have enough votes on the board to remove them?" Richard's response was quick, "Yes, but we must keep it secret until it's public. They'll fight back." Fight back, those words clanged in her thoughts. She pictured the menacing phone call from Ron, the possibility of more physical attacks like Grace endured. Or worse, them targeting Andrew. She immediately called Daniel. "Friday is doomsday," she said, voice taut. "Richard will present the evidence to the board. We need you to have your people in place to protect Grace and me. Maybe even Andrew." Daniel listened calmly. "Understood. I'll expand coverage. I can also have someone shadow your son at school, discreetly, just until this is over." The thought of a bodyguard following Andrew around disturbed her, but Evelyn knew the threat was real. She gave Daniel the details, feeling slightly better that at least Andrew wouldn't be unprotected. With that settled, she turned her attention to the cunning minds of Ethan and Ron. If they caught even a whisper of the board meeting's real intent, they might accelerate their scheme or vanish altogether. taking millions with them. She needed to play her role well for the next 2 days. Keep Ethan unsuspecting, feign ignorance, and be the supportive spouse. That evening, she was tidying up the living room when Ethan strolled in, suitcase in hand from Chicago. "Long trip," he muttered, dropping it by the door. He looked tired but triumphant in some grim way. Evelyn plastered on a smile. "Welcome back. I made dinner." He eyed the dining table, set with salmon and greens. "Thanks," he said more politely than she expected. As they settled at the table, Andrew recounted his track meet performance. Ethan offered half-hearted praise, yet his focus was clearly elsewhere. She watched him push food around his plate, stealing glances at his phone. At one point, Ethan cleared his throat. "So, rumor has it, there's a board meeting on Friday. You know anything about that?" Evelyn shrugged casually, spearing a piece of salmon. Richard mentioned something, probably the usual updates. She forced a playful note into her voice. "Why? Are you worried the CFO's job is on the line?" He smirked. "Of course not. If anything, they need me more than ever. But you never know with these corporate dinosaurs. They might try to shake things up." He glanced at Andrew, who was engrossed in his phone. Lowering his voice, he said to Evelyn, "I might need to leave again soon. More investor meetings." Investor meetings, she thought, or a flight to Zurich. She feigned a sigh. Busy times. "Just don't forget your son wants to see you at least once a week." He chuckled, but it was devoid of warmth. "I'll find time, sure." Then he reached across the table and covered her hand with his. An uncharacteristic gesture of intimacy. "You know I appreciate your patience." "Right?" His eyes searched hers. "Once this big push is over, everything will be better for us. I promise." Evelyn swallowed, fighting the urge to snatch her hand away. She recognized this as a manipulative attempt, throwing a breadcrumb of affection to keep her complacent. She offered a thin smile. "I'm sure it will." But in her heart, she knew there was no saving this marriage. Friday would unravel everything, and either Ethan would be forced out or he'd flee, leaving her and Andrew behind. Part of her felt sorrow, remembering the man he used to be, or at least the man she thought he was. Yet a larger part of her burned with conviction she would protect Delaney and Sons and Andrew's future, no matter the cost. Thursday dawned with a swirl of activity. Emails zipped back and forth between Evelyn, Richard, and the attorneys. They laid out the plan at the board meeting. Richard would present the official forensic audit results. It would show unaccounted transfers, matched to accounts Helios advisors controlled, and link them to Ethan and Ron's authorizations. Once the board saw the scope of the fraud, they would vote to suspend them pending further investigation and simultaneously name Evelyn as interim CEO, fulfilling the succession plan Richard had quietly put in place. Ayel. The final piece was a meeting with a key board member, Marjorie Hyatt, who chaired the ethics committee. Evelyn arranged a discreet lunch at a quiet bistro downtown. Marjorie, a formidable woman in her 60s, arrived dressed in a sharp teal pantsuit, eyes glinting with curiosity. They ordered light salads, and once the waiter was out of earshot, Evelyn slid a folder across the table. "Inside is a sampling of the evidence you'll see tomorrow," Evelyn explained. "We wanted you to have a heads up this is significant. Marjorie, Ethan and Ron have orchestrated large-scale embezzlement, funneling millions out of Delaney and Sons." Marjorie's brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages, gaze darkening with each line. "Good Lord," she murmured. "Richard told me you were investigating, but I never imagined it was this extensive." She paused, scanning more. "And you're absolutely certain these authorizations trace back to Ethan's credentials?" Evelyn nodded, grateful that Marjorie was taking it seriously. "Yes, we double-checked. It's not a case of stolen logins. They've created a complex web of shell companies in Switzerland. some in the Caymans, too, all tied to Helios advisors. Marjorie pressed her lips together, setting the folder down. The board will be furious. I'll make sure they understand how grave this is. But you realize what happens after we suspend Ethan, right? The press will have a field day, and the stock might dip. Evelyn leaned in. We're prepared. We have a crisis management plan, and I'll step in as interim CEO immediately to stabilize operations. This was the first time she openly stated she'd be taking the helm. It felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Richards prepared to announce his retirement and my appointment on the same day. We have to act fast to prevent further losses. Marjorie nodded slowly, closing the folder. This company was built on Richard's vision, and if he trusts you, I trust you. Let's do this. But be cautious, Ethan isn't one to bow out gracefully. Evelyn gave a wry laugh. I've noticed. She remembered the bruises on Grace's wrist, the threatening phone call from Ron. Let's just get through tomorrow. They finished lunch with hushed small talk, aware that waiters and nearby diners might overhear. As Marjorie departed, a determined set in her jaw, Evelyn felt a wave of relief. Having the ethics committee chair firmly on board was crucial. She would rally other members who respected her moral compass. On the drive home, though, anxiety clawed at Evelyn's stomach. She flashed back to the hooded figure in the parking garage. With less than 24 hours to go, Ethan's people might attempt one last desperate move. Her phone buzzed. Daniel's message read, "No major movement from Ethan. He's at the office, meeting with Ron. Might be pulling an all-nighter." She typed back, "Keep eyes on them, especially if they leave the office unexpectedly." A hush fell over her as she pulled into the driveway. Andrew was at school. The house was silent. She climbed out of the car and paused, scanning the street for suspicious vehicles. Nothing unusual. Maybe they were done with intimidation tactics, or maybe the final blow was still coming. That evening, Evelyn found herself facing an unexpected visitor, her mother-in-law, Sophia Carter. A last-minute phone call from Sophia had announced her arrival. She was in the area and wanted to stop by. Evelyn had never been particularly close with Sophia, but they maintained cordial ties. She couldn't refuse, not without raising suspicions. Sophia arrived in a flurry of perfume and carefully styled hair, her impeccable designer coat draped over her arm. She breezed into the living room, surveying the space as if grading Evelyn's housekeeping. "Hello, dear," she said, smiling thinly. "I just thought we should chat mother to daughter-in-law." Evelyn forced a smile. "Offering tea." "Of course. Ethan's running late at the office. It's been a busy week." Sophia perched on the edge of the couch, crossing her ankles delicately. "That's exactly why I'm here. Ethan seems so stressed lately. I worry about him. He mentioned you've been spending a lot of time at Delaney and Sons. Are you pushing him for some reason?" Evelyn's heart skipped. It was clear Sophia was fishing for information. She carefully poured tea, avoiding eye contact. "Pushing him? No. He's CFO. The pressure comes with the job." Sophia waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Yes, but I sense tension. I know my son. He's mentioned you've been meddling with corporate matters. Now, dear, you must understand that a man in his position doesn't need distractions from a wife who thinks she's more than just a supportive partner. Men don't like that, especially men in high power." Evelyn stilled, her anger flaring. She realized Sophia was parroting Ethan's narrative that Evelyn was stepping out of line by involving herself in corporate affairs. She forced a polite tone. "I'm simply helping Richard, who's like a father to me. If Ethan feels threatened, that's his perspective." Sophia pursed her lips, scanning Evelyn's expression. "Let me be frank. Ethan has plans for a major expansion, and I'd hate to see that ruined by any misunderstanding. He confided that you might be interfering. I came to encourage you, as family, to let the men handle their business, for your own good." Evelyn felt the burn of Sophia's words. This was a veiled warning. I appreciate your concern, she said softly. But Delaney and Sons is bigger than just Ethan. Richard built it, and I have a stake in its future. Sophia's gaze narrowed. I know you do, but if you push Ethan too far, you might find yourself on the losing side. That wouldn't be good for Andrew, would it? There it was, another threat, this time leveraging Andrew's well-being. Evelyn's patience snapped. Sophia, I love Andrew more than anything. If Ethan makes reckless choices that harm this family, that's on him, not me. A silence stretched. Then Sophia stood, smoothing her skirt. I see I can't dissuade you. That's unfortunate. Just remember, Ethan isn't the kind of man who loses easily. Her tone was icy, concluding, Good night, dear. Evelyn followed her to the door, her jaw clenched. As Sophia's car disappeared, Evelyn locked the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Now Ethan had enlisted his mother to guilt or intimidate her. Clearly, they sensed a looming battle. She inhaled deeply, resolving that no matter what manipulations came, she would stand firm. Andrew's future, Richard's legacy, and her own conscience demanded it. Tomorrow, the board meeting would decide everything, and she refused to be cowed by archaic notions of a wife's proper place. Friday morning dawned cold and clear. Evelyn woke at 5 a.m., nerves taut as piano wires. Today was the day. By 7, Andrew was off to school, and she found herself alone again, sipping coffee at the kitchen counter, bracing for the showdown at the 10 AM board meeting. She wore a charcoal pantsuit with a crisp white blouse, professional, understated but undeniably authoritative. Her phone buzzed. Richard's text read, Board is gathered. Ethan and Ron are on their way. I'll signal you when it's time. She breathed deeply, remembering the carefully choreographed plan first. Richard would lead the meeting under the guise of routine updates. Then, mid-meeting, he'd pivot to the audit findings, unveiling the financial anomalies. Marjorie Hyatt would back him up with the ethics committee's standpoint. Finally, Evelyn would enter with the forensic proof. Once that happened, the board would vote. Ethan left the house earlier than usual, not even waking her. She assumed he was conferring with Ron, possibly trying to preempt any revelations. Little did he know that everything was locked and loaded, with most board members informed. She half expected a last-minute sabotage attempt, maybe a power outage or crashed servers. But Daniel had texted at dawn that all systems were secure. The legal teams had made multiple backups of the data. At 9:30, Evelyn climbed into her car, heart fluttering like a caged bird. The drive to Delaney and Sons headquarters felt surreal. Each stoplight seemed to blink an omen of what was to come. She parked, walked through the familiar lobby, and nodded at Barry, the guard, who gave her an encouraging smile as if he knew the significance of this day. Up on the executive floor, the atmosphere was eerily calm, with the secretaries working away, phone lines buzzing in that subdued corporate hum. She stepped into a side office Richard had prepared for her. There, she found a small group Daniel, Grace's wrist still bandaged, and two of Richard's private attorneys. They all greeted her with quiet determination. Daniel spoke first. We have your backs. Security is stationed outside the boardroom. If Ethan or Ron get aggressive, we'll intervene. Grace nodded timidly, offering Evelyn a flash drive, just in case they demand original documents. This has the full ledger trail. Evelyn took a seat, carefully breathing to steady her nerves. Richard should be calling me in at about 10:15, she said, glancing at the clock. I'll walk in and present the final piece. She knew once she stepped through those mahogany doors, her life would change irreversibly. She would be exposing her husband, ending her marriage, and stepping into the role Richard intended for her. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Remember why you're doing this. You're protecting the company and the people who rely on it. Grace's eyes shone with gratitude. You're also protecting me and thousands of employees who had no idea. Evelyn smiled faintly. Let's hope it goes smoothly. But she doubted anything about confronting Ethan would be smooth. At 10:10, her phone buzzed Richard's signal. The attorneys gave her a final nod. She rose, smoothing her suit, collecting her folder of documents, the sense of finality thick in the air. Grace whispered, "Good luck," as Evelyn stepped out into the hallway. The walk to the boardroom felt like traversing a mile-long gauntlet. Her footsteps echoed on the polished floor. She paused outside the closed double doors, drawing one last strengthening breath. Behind those doors, she heard Richard's resonant voice addressing the board. In moments, she would change Delaney and Sons forever, dethroning a corrupt CFO and COO, unveiling her own rightful place. A single wave of regret swelled in her chest. Regret that Ethan had chosen greed over the family they once shared, but that regret was overshadowed by fierce resolve. The time had come. Evelyn stepped through the boardroom doors, and the world seemed to slow. 14 members of the board sat around a gleaming oval table, their expressions tight with anticipation. At the head, Richard stood, hands clasped behind his back. Ethan and Ron sat to his left, their faces betraying disbelief that Evelyn was entering with such calm authority. Murmurs rippled through the room. Richard's voice carried a solemn tone. Members of the board, as we've been reviewing the results of this extraordinary audit, I'd like to invite my associate, Evelyn Carter, to present further clarity. He gestured for her to join him. Ethan shot to his feet. What is she doing here? He tried to sound outraged, but Evelyn caught the flicker of panic in his eyes. Ron looked even more unsettled, his arms folded defensively over his chest. Evelyn moved to the head of the table, meeting each board member's gaze, saving Ethan's for last. "Good morning," she began evenly. "I'm here because Delaney and Sons is at a crossroads. We've discovered through a thorough audit significant financial discrepancies involving Helios Advisors and other shell corporations." She flipped open her folder, revealing a stack of documents. These discrepancies point to a coordinated effort to divert company funds into overseas accounts. All eyes swung to Ethan and Ron. A few board members glowered, clearly having been briefed by Richard. Marjorie Hyatt cleared her throat, guiding attention back to Evelyn. "Please proceed with the details." Ethan's jaw clenched. "This is absurd. She's not even an employee. She can't just barge in and accuse us of wrongdoing." He slammed a hand on the table, but the impact rang hollow. "I may not be on the payroll," Evelyn countered calmly, "but I am Richard Delaney's designated successor, a fact known to the board members here." She scanned the faces of those who had agreed to keep her role quiet until the evidence was ironclad. "More importantly, I have irrefutable proof documents authorized by CFO Ethan Carter and COO Ron Mathers that facilitated illegal transfers." Ron blustered. "She's lying. This is some twisted power grab." But his darting gaze hinted that he knew how damning the evidence was. Evelyn remained composed, sliding printouts of transaction logs across the table. Here is one example, a transfer of $2.3 million from Delaney's R&D funds to Helios Advisors, labeled as consulting fees. We have dozens of similar transfers, all lacking legitimate invoices. As you can see, the authorization code used is tied to CFO Carter's credentials. A heavy silence fell, then Richard addressed the board, voice grim. "I've had an independent team verify everything Evelyn has presented. It's real. This is embezzlement at a vast scale." One of the senior board members, A white-haired man named Morrison glowered at Ethan. Explain this, Carter. Why would the CFO of Delaney and Sons funnel funds to a Swiss shell? Ethan sputtered, face flushing. This is a misunderstanding. Maybe my credentials were stolen. He sent Ron a frantic look. Or maybe she tampered with them. She's got inside access to my personal computer. This is a frame job. Evelyn folded her arms, steady gaze unwavering. If that's true, Ethan, how do you explain your upcoming flight to Zurich next week, booked through the Helios Advisors contact, or the repeated offshore calls to set up trust accounts in your name and Ron's? She lifted a second folder. We have phone records, travel itineraries, and more. Even if you destroy the digital files, we have backups. The truth is out. A ripple of shock coursed through the board. Eyes darted between Ethan, who stood trembling in anger, and Ron, whose face had gone pale. It was clear this was no petty squabble, but the unmasking of a grand crime. Richard exhaled, looking every bit the wearied patriarch. I move for an immediate vote to suspend CFO Carter and COO Mathers, pending a full investigation, and to appoint Evelyn Carter as interim CEO. This was the moment. The board members nodded grimly, some looking disappointed, others outraged at the betrayal. Marjorie spoke up. I second the motion. A flurry of voices called aye, and within moments, the entire board had voted unanimously. Ethan fumed. This is insane. You can't just replace me with my own wife. She's an amateur. He lunged toward Evelyn, but Daniel stepped in from the side of the room, once invisible. That's enough, Daniel's deep voice warned, placing a firm hand on Ethan's shoulder. You need to calm down. In that split second, Evelyn saw the marriage she once cherished reduced to ashes. She offered no words of comfort. Instead, she turned to face the board. Thank you for your trust, she said softly, trying to steady her racing heart. I'll do everything in my power to guide Delaney and Sons forward ethically and sustainably. Outside, the distant hum of city traffic continued as if nothing momentous had occurred. But inside this boardroom, the balance of power had shifted in a single decisive moment. Evelyn Carter was now the new chief executive, and her first act would be to quarantine every ounce of corruption that Ethan and Ron had seeded. An hour after the board voted, Evelyn found herself alone in Richard Delaney's old office, the door locked. She needed a moment to process the shockwaves still reverberating through her mind. Just outside the door, she could hear muffled voices, security personnel escorting Ethan and Ron away, along with hushed conversations from stunned employees learning the news of the sudden shakeup. Although everything had gone according to plan, the emotional weight felt massive. She pulled out her phone and saw an unread text from Andrew Dad just called. He sounded weird. Is everything okay? She rubbed her eyes, feeling the twinge of a headache blossoming at her temples. She had expected Ethan to lash out, but she hadn't expected the swirling mixture of rage and heartbreak clouding her thoughts. Despite the corruption he'd committed, she still recalled the early years of their marriage when they were equal partners in love and strategy. Back then, they'd talk about financial models late into the night, each fascinated by the other's mind. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who nearly destroyed her family's legacy. Deciding Andrew needed some reassurance, she typed a quick reply. We're safe. I'll explain later. Focus on school. Love you. She swallowed the lump in her throat, mentally drafting what she'd say to her son that evening. Everything had changed now his father was disgraced. She couldn't sugarcoat it, but she also needed to protect Andrew's emotional well-being. A gentle knock pulled her attention away. When she opened the door, Richard stepped in, wearing the exhaustion of an old man who had just witnessed a painful passing of the torch. He sank into the chair opposite her, exhaling. It's done. The board is contacting corporate lawyers now, and we've locked down all systems connected to Ethan's accounts. Evelyn nodded grimly. And Ron Security is escorting him out as we speak. He threatened to file a wrongful termination suit, but Marjorie reminded him that crimes aren't covered under corporate immunity. Richard paused, eyes studying Evelyn's face. How are you holding up? She managed a tight smile. Relieved in some ways, scared in others. She gestured to the office walls, a lifetime's worth of accomplishments displayed in photographs and plaques. Everything's moving so fast. One moment I'm investigating quietly. The next I'm CEO. I wanted this for the sake of the company, but not like this. Richard's gaze softened. I know. This was never about revenge. It was about saving Delaney and Sons. You've done exactly what I trained you to do, protect the legacy with integrity. He reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. Now you need to be strong. The fallout will be messy media inquiries, employee morale issues, and Ethan might try something desperate. But I believe in you. His words steadied her. Thanks, Dad, she said, reverting momentarily to the affectionate term she'd used since she was a teenager. I'll schedule a company-wide meeting for tomorrow morning. We'll address employees, reassure them, let them know we have a plan. Richard nodded. Yes, transparency. That's the Delaney way. And you'll have full executive authority. I've already resigned my post, effective immediately. A shadow passed across his features. It feels strange to say that, but it's time. Evelyn didn't miss the sadness in his voice. Despite the turmoil, he was a father figure letting go of his life's work. She stood, moving to his side. We'll do it justice, I promise. And you're not disappearing. You're just stepping back. He patted her hand, a final gesture of passing the torch. You take your rightful place, Evelyn Carter. I couldn't be prouder, no matter how hard today has been. When Evelyn finally emerged into the hallway, she found Daniel Briggs waiting, arms folded, speaking in low tones with Grace Nakamura. At the sight of her, Daniel straightened. I've done a sweep of the building. Ethan left with a security escort about 10 minutes ago, practically in a rage. Ron tried to sneak out through the loading dock, but the guards caught him. Evelyn sighed heavily. Any sign they tried to download or erase data? Grace shook her head, adjusting the sling around her wrist. It says they locked all CFO and COO credentials the moment you finished in the boardroom. They can't access our systems. She smiled tentatively. Congrats, Evelyn. And thank you. Evelyn nodded. This is just the beginning. Grace, I'm naming you interim chief accountant at an executive level if you're willing. We need someone who knows the system inside and out, and I can't think of anyone more dedicated. Grace's eyes widened. Me, but you're perfect for it, Evelyn insisted. No more overshadowing your talents. You found the first clues of fraud, and I trust you implicitly. A flush of gratitude colored Grace's cheeks. Yes, of course, I'd be honored. Her face then clouded with concern. I just worry Ethan and Ron might retaliate. You already saw what they did in the garage. Daniel stepped in. I'll coordinate security for her and any other key personnel. We can't risk them pulling another stunt. He glanced at Evelyn. What about your home, your son? Evelyn's stomach tightened. Andrew's still at school. He texted me that Ethan called him earlier. I don't want to alarm him, but I also don't want Ethan anywhere near Andrew until we figure out his next move. Daniel nodded. I can have one of my men pick Andrew up after classes, discreetly. Maybe keep him at a safe location if you think Ethan might confront him. She hesitated, torn between not wanting to terrify Andrew and knowing the threat was real. Do it. Better safe than sorry. At that moment, her newly assigned executive assistant, a young man named David, approached. Ms. Carter, the press is calling nonstop for a statement. Also, employees are gathering in the auditorium. They heard rumors about a CEO appointment. Evelyn steeled herself. I'll address them. Grace. Daniel, can you finalize a security protocol for tonight? We'll do a thorough sweep of any possible infiltration points. They nodded. Evelyn turned to David. Give me 5 minutes, then call everyone to the auditorium. It's time they hear from me directly. She walked down the hall, shoulders squared. The adrenaline rush from confronting Ethan had begun to recede, replaced by the reality of her new position CEO at the helm of a corporation reeling from scandal. The employees deserved answers and reassurance. After all, they were innocent bystanders in a drama that played out among the upper echelon. As she strode toward the auditorium, she passed glass windows overlooking the city skyline. The sunlight glinted off skyscrapers, a reminder that the world kept turning despite personal betrayals and corporate showdowns. She inhaled, collecting her composure, ready to face her new role. The fiasco with Ethan had tested her resolve, but she wasn't about to crumble. She would lead Delaney and Sons through this crisis and emerge stronger for it. The main auditorium at Delaney and Sons could seat nearly 1,000 employees. This time of day, not everyone was on site, but a sizable crowd had gathered, buzzing with rumor and anxiety. Evelyn stood backstage, heart pounding as the hush on the other side of the curtain indicated they were moments from addressing her. Richard had offered to join her, but she insisted on going alone. It's time I face them as the new CEO, not just your stand-in, she'd told him. So she stood there in the dim light, recalling all the times she'd accompanied Ethan to corporate events, relegated to the CFO's wife. Now the podium and the responsibility was hers. An overhead speaker chirped, "Attention, everyone. May we have your seats? Ms. Evelyn Carter will be making a statement about recent leadership changes." David's calm voice carried across the auditorium, and Evelyn knew it was her cue. She inhaled one last fortifying breath, then stepped onto the stage. A wave of whispers swept the crowd. Many recognized her face, but had never heard her speak in a business context. She took her place behind the lectern, scanning the rows of employees, some anxious, some curious, a few outright skeptical. Cameras and phones were aimed her way. She gripped the edges of the lectern and began, "Thank you all for gathering on short notice. My name is Evelyn Carter. As of this morning, I've been appointed CEO of Delaney and Sons." She paused to let that sink in, then continued, "I realize this comes as a surprise. You've known me in a different capacity, perhaps only as an occasional visitor or as Mr. Ethan Carter's spouse. But there's a lot you might not know about me." She briefly summarized her longtime connection to Richard Delaney, how he'd been her mentor and father figure, how she'd trained under him for years behind the scenes. "I've been studying every aspect of this company's operations, finances, and strategic vision to one day step in and continue Mr. Delaney's legacy of integrity and innovation." She let her gaze sweep the room again. That time is now. A flutter of reaction. Some employees looked relieved that the reins were being handed to a Delaney protege. Others seemed stunned. Evelyn pressed on. "You've likely heard rumors about investigations into financial misconduct by certain executives. Unfortunately, those rumors are true. We've uncovered evidence of embezzlement and misappropriation of company funds tied to CFO Ethan Carter and COO Ron Mathers. Both have been removed from their positions effective immediately." A collective gasp, then a surge of chatter. She raised her voice above the din. "I know this is distressing news, but I want to assure you that our priority is to protect Delaney and Sons, its employees, its clients, and its reputation. We have assembled a special audit committee to oversee a thorough review. No stone will be left unturned." She recalled how Richard coached her in crisis communication. Be transparent, be empathetic, but also project confidence. I also want to stress that these events, though unsettling, do not define who we are. Delaney and Sons has thrived for decades by valuing honesty, collaboration, and respect for each other. I am committed to preserving and strengthening those values. A round of applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing. Some employees stood, clapping. Others wiped tears, overwhelmed by relief or shock. Evelyn swallowed the lump in her throat, maintaining composure. This is real, she told herself. I'm standing here, leading. After outlining the immediate next steps, designating Grace Nakamura as interim chief accountant, forming a crisis management team, and reassuring everyone that they would have job security, she concluded, "Thank you for your patience and your trust. We'll walk this path together and emerge stronger on the other side." The applause gained momentum, and she felt a wash of emotion. Striding off stage, she caught sight of David giving her a thumbs up. She allowed herself a small smile, relieved that the first major public address was over. Now came the harder part, living up to the promises she had just made. Chaye. Once the meeting wrapped, the rest of the day unfolded in a blur of media calls, emergency committee gatherings, and hurried sign-offs on critical documents. Evelyn had never felt more energized or more drained. By 6 in the evening, she realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast, her stomach twisting with anxiety and hunger. David, the new assistant, must have sensed her weariness. He brought in a tray of sandwiches and bottled water, reminding her gently to take a break. She thanked him, nibbling on half a sandwich while scanning the latest email updates from legal counsel. The attorneys were finalizing language for a press release, which would officially confirm Ethan and Ron's dismissal and outline the next steps for Delaney and Sons. A knock on the office door diverted her attention. Grace peeked inside. "Do you have a minute?" She held a sheaf of papers. "I've uncovered more anomalies, smaller ones, hidden deeper in old records. I got Mickey's." They suggest Ethan and Ron might have started this funneling scheme almost 3 years ago. Evelyn rubbed her temples. 3 years. So it wasn't just a recent spree. Grace nodded, placing the documents on Evelyn's desk. It's unsettling how much they siphoned, yet managed to keep it under the radar. This might increase the legal repercussions. Evelyn flipped through the papers, her tension mounting. So the hole is even deeper than we thought. This will probably balloon the scandal, too. She mentally pictured the headlines, "Long-term embezzlement at Delaney and Sons family feud shatters iconic company." A fresh wave of dread washed over her at the thought of Andrew seeing such coverage about his father. Grace lowered her voice. "I'm sorry. Evelyn, this must be awful on a personal level." She inhaled, forcing composure. "Thanks. It's definitely not easy." She set the papers aside. "We'll add this to the ongoing investigation." The key is to be thorough no matter how painful it gets. I'd rather we rip the bandage off now than let it fester. Grace murmured agreement, then hesitated. "I want you to know, if you need any help, emotional or otherwise, I'm here." Evelyn managed a small, grateful smile. "I appreciate that, Grace, and I'm thankful you trusted me enough to share your initial findings. This company needs more people like you." With a gentle squeeze of her shoulder, Grace left the room, leaving Evelyn to stare at the growing stack of incriminating documents. The magnitude of Ethan's betrayal felt immeasurable. Memories of their early days flashed in her mind, quiet dinners filled with laughter and financial banter, Ethan praising her analytical mind. Now it felt as if every compliment had been laced with manipulation. Her phone rang, the caller ID flashing Daniel Briggs. She answered immediately. "Any news?" Daniel's voice sounded crisp. "We picked up Andrew from school and brought him to a secure location near your house. Don't worry, he thinks it's just extra safety due to the media storm. No sign of Ethan yet, but the mother-in-law Sophia has been spotted lurking nearby. Evelyn groaned inwardly. She came by last night, tried to persuade me to drop my pursuit. Keep an eye on her, too, please. She can be manipulative, and Andrew's upset enough already. Daniel agreed, then hesitated. Ethan might be erratic right now. My contacts suggest he's called multiple lawyers. He could try to dispute the board's decision. Or worse, come after you personally. Don't underestimate him. She thanked him for the warning and hung up, a leaden weight settling in her chest. She had won the corporate battle, but hadn't secured personal peace. Ethan was still out there, likely nursing vengeance. As she rubbed her brow, she realized she couldn't hide from him forever. Eventually, she'd have to face him perhaps in a court of law, or even face to face to finalize the end of their marriage and the consequences of his crimes. That night, the executive floor grew quiet by 8 p.m. Most employees had gone home, but Evelyn stayed, determined to wrap up essential tasks. She wanted to personally review a final draft of the press release and coordinate with the IT department on reinforcing system firewalls in case Ethan or Ron attempted a remote breach. She was in Richard's old office, her office now sifting through contract proposals. The overhead lights cast sharp shadows across the polished desk. A sense of déjà vu struck her. She'd always imagined herself here, but never under these circumstances. A knock interrupted her reverie. "Come in," she called, expecting David or Grace. Instead, Marjorie Hyatt entered, her expression somber. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Evelyn said, motioning for her to sit. She respected Marjorie's no-nonsense demeanor, sharpened by years in corporate governance. Marjorie settled in, folding her hands. "I wanted to check on you. Earlier today was intense. I've seen many corporate coups, but never one where the CEO ousts her own spouse." She paused, scanning Evelyn's face for any crack in her armor. "I'm worried about you." Evelyn appreciated the concern. "I'm fine, considering it had to be done." Marjorie inclined her head. "Yes, for the company's sake. But don't forget your own. The aftermath is often harder than the confrontation. Ethan could launch a smear campaign to damage your credibility, or he might come after you in divorce proceedings." Evelyn swallowed. "I've started bracing for that. My attorneys are on standby." She set her papers aside, leaning forward. "You've known the Delaney organization for decades. What's your read on how this will settle?" Marjorie pursed her lips in thought. "The company will recover, given the evidence is squarely on your side. The market admires Delaney's legacy, and they'll rally behind a strong new CEO if you steer this well. But personally, you're about to endure a battle on multiple fronts: legal, emotional, even familial." She paused, softening her voice. "If you need a confidant or an ally in the boardroom, I'm here. You're not alone." "Evelyn." A hint of relief sparked inside Evelyn. "Thank you, Marjorie. That means a lot." She hesitated, then asked something that'd been weighing on her. "Do you think I did the right thing, exposing Ethan so publicly?" So suddenly, Marjorie reached across the desk, her grip firm. "Absolutely. It wasn't just the right thing, it was necessary. He betrayed the company, and no personal relationship excuses that." Evelyn nodded, a tightness in her chest loosening. "I appreciate your honesty." They spoke for another few minutes about board procedure and upcoming shareholder meetings before Marjorie stood to leave. "Go home soon, Evelyn," she advised, casting a meaningful look around the dimly lit office. "You've had a long day, and tomorrow will bring new challenges, I'm sure." Evelyn watched her go, reflecting on the kindness in those words. Outside, night had fully descended, and she felt the press of exhaustion. Yet she still had a mountain of tasks clamoring for her attention. With a resigned sigh, She resumed her work, determined to strengthen Delaney and Sons for the fight ahead. If Ethan or Ron attempted any final sabotage, they would find her prepared and resolute. The next morning, Saturday, brought a whirlwind of media scrutiny. Before Evelyn could even pour her first cup of coffee at home, the press was running headlines like scandal at Delaney and Sons. CEO Evelyn Carter ousts CFO husband over alleged embezzlement. Andrew, seated at the kitchen table, read the alerts on his phone, his face ashen. "Mom," he said quietly, turning the screen toward her. "It's everywhere." The article he showed her detailed lurid theories. Was this a power-hungry wife scenario or a heroic whistleblower? The tabloids were spinning it in every direction. Evelyn's stomach twisted. "I'm sorry you have to see this," she murmured, stepping over to lay a hand on his shoulder. "We can't control what the media says." Andrew lifted troubled eyes to her. Is he really an embezzler?" The word sounded foreign on his lips. "Did you set him up?" She exhaled, taking a seat across from him. "I didn't set him up. He's the one who made those choices, stealing money from the company, covering it up with shell accounts. I can't hide it from you. Andrew, he broke the law." Andrew's lip quivered. "He called me again last night. Said you were framing him to take over Delaney and Sons. I don't know who to believe." Pain speared Evelyn's heart. She wanted to spare Andrew this conflict. "I understand it's confusing. I have evidence. Andrew, so does the board. Your dad. He's not telling you the truth. I'm sorry." Andrew's eyes filled with tears. "Why would he do that? We're his family." She reached across, squeezing his hand. "Sometimes people get caught up in power and money and forget what's right. It's not an excuse, but it's the only explanation." Her voice grew hoarse. "I never wanted it to be like this, son, but I couldn't stand by while he stole millions. It would destroy the company your grandfather built and hurt thousands of employees." Andrew inhaled sharply, wiping his eyes. "So what happens now?" Evelyn swallowed. "He might face criminal charges if the authorities pursue this. The board is cooperating with an official investigation. I've hired lawyers to keep you and me out of it as much as possible. But yes, there might be a trial." Andrew nodded slowly, processing this grim future. "What about us? Mom, will we be okay?" She pulled him into a hug, heart clenching at how vulnerable he felt in her arms. "We'll be okay. It's going to be rough, but we have each other, and I promise I'll do everything I can to protect you." In that moment, her phone chimed from the counter, a text from Daniel Ethan spotted near your neighborhood. "Be cautious." Evelyn's throat went dry. She tightened her hold on Andrew, steeling herself for the next confrontation. Despite everything, Ethan was still lurking in their lives. She whispered a silent vow. She would face him again if necessary, but she would not let him tear their son apart with manipulation. 30 minutes later, as Evelyn sat in the living room planning her day, the doorbell rang. Andrew peeked out the window and immediately stepped back, eyes wide. "Mom, it's Dad," he whispered, panic edging his voice. Her heart thundered. She told Andrew, "Go to your room. I'll talk to him." Hesitating, she texted Daniel a quick note. "He's here. Stand by." Steeling herself, she opened the front door. Ethan stood on the porch, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. He wore casual clothes that looked rumpled, as if he'd slept in them if he slept at all. "We need to talk," he said tersely, glancing past her. "Is Andrew here?" Evelyn blocked the doorway. "He's inside, but he doesn't want to see you upset." "Why are you here, Ethan?" He exhaled a ragged breath, like a man on the edge. "I wanted to see my son, to explain." She tightened her grip on the doorknob. "Explain how you embezzled millions, or how you lied to both of us." Ethan's nostrils flared. Don't do that. Don't stand there acting righteous. You know this was about us, our future. That company was never going to pass the reins to me once Richard realized you were his golden child. A wave of hurt clashed with anger inside her. So your response was to steal from Delaney and Sons. That doesn't make sense. He shoved his hands into his pockets, tension evident in every line of his body. Look, maybe I crossed some lines, but you blindsided me, made me look like a criminal in front of the entire board. You didn't even give me a chance to come clean. She stared at him in disbelief. Come clean after you intimidated Grace, organized a network of shell accounts, and framed it as consulting fees. Do you realize the damage you've done? He waved her off. Don't act like I forced your hand. You wanted to be CEO. Well, congratulations. Now you have everything. His bitter tone tore at her nerves. She crossed her arms. All I wanted was for Delaney and Sons to thrive. You left me no choice but to expose you. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Let me see Andrew. Her pulse hammered. Not like this. You're angry. You're volatile. I won't let you manipulate him. Ethan's mouth twitched. Manipulate him. He's my son, too. The tension crackled. Evelyn held her ground. You lost that privilege when you used him as a pawn, calling him behind my back, feeding him lies about me framing you. He seemed ready to explode, but something kept him in check. He took a shaky breath. I didn't come here to fight. I came because I'm leaving the country temporarily. I wanted to say goodbye to Andrew. A chill shot down Evelyn's spine. Leaving? Where? He shrugged, glancing at his shoes. Doesn't matter. Zurich, maybe. I still have resources. He looked at her, eyes bleak. I'll get a good lawyer, fight the charges. But I'm not sticking around to be publicly dragged through the mud. Let Andrew know I care about him, no matter what you say. Evelyn felt an ache in her chest. So he was running. Cowardly. You can tell him yourself, but not today. He's shaken. Let him process. He nodded, jaw set. Fine. But remember this everything you did to me. I'll return in kind one day. You might be CEO now, but you're no saint. Evelyn, trembling, she retorted, threatening me won't help your case? He scoffed, turning on his heel. I'll be in touch, one way or another. Then he stomped down the driveway, disappearing into a waiting car. Evelyn stood there, heart pounding in her ears, watching the vehicle roll away. Part of her felt relief that he was leaving. Another part dreaded what havoc he might wreak from overseas. In that moment, Andrew peeked around the corner, eyes brimming with tears. He's gone, he asked softly. She could only nod, wondering how to mend the fracture Ethan had torn open in their lives. That same afternoon, Evelyn convened a meeting in the Delaney and Sons executive conference room with her core crisis team Grace Nakamura, Daniel Briggs, Marjorie Hyatt, and two external auditors hired to oversee the investigation. The mood was subdued, everyone aware that Ethan was not only out of the company, but possibly fleeing the country. They sat around a round table, digital displays of transaction trails glowing on screen. One of the auditors, a gray-haired woman named Florence King, spoke first. We've identified an approximate total of $28 million in unauthorized transfers over 3 years. That number could climb to $35 million once we finish cross-referencing older data. Marjorie rubbed her temples. $35 million? Good heavens! The board will be livid. Grace chimed in. We can recover some of it if we act quickly. The Swiss accounts might be frozen, especially if the authorities cooperate. She shot Evelyn a concerned glance. But if Ethan left for Zurich already, or plans too soon, he might try to move the money again. Evelyn nodded. We'll notify our attorneys. They'll expedite international cooperation. Switzerland doesn't take kindly to criminals laundering through their banks. But we need irrefutable evidence, which we have, thank goodness. Daniel folded his arms, scanning the room. And Ron Mathers. Any sign of him trying to skip town? Florence shrugged. We've heard rumors he's lawyered up. He might attempt a legal battle, but with this much proof, I doubt he'll get far. She paused, then glanced at Evelyn. The question is, where does this leave you? Ms. Carter, the press coverage is all about the CEO who toppled her husband. Will it affect your standing? Evelyn sighed, leaning back in her chair. The scandal's bad, but as long as we stay transparent and cooperate with the investigation, we'll weather it. Our immediate concern is stabilizing operations, reassuring investors and employees that we're moving forward. Marjorie nodded. Agreed. I'll arrange calls with our top shareholders next week. Explain the situation. A clear plan to recover lost funds and strengthen internal controls will help mitigate panic. Grace tapped her pen anxiously. I'm worried about employee morale. People are spooked. They wonder if we'll lose major clients, if layoffs are coming. Evelyn frowned. We're not planning layoffs. This was a financial theft, not a budget crisis. We'll hold another town hall to reaffirm job security and highlight new compliance measures. Daniel spoke up next. Good call. Let them see you're proactive and honest. But keep in mind, Ethan might still contact people on the inside. He had allies, or at least folks who benefited from his nepotism. Stay vigilant. Evelyn nodded. Right. We'll conduct a thorough purge of compromised personnel if necessary. She checked the clock on the wall. Let's finalize a draft of our recovery plan. I want to present it to the full board Monday morning. They spent the next hour hammering out details, new audit committees, stricter approval chains, third-party compliance checks. By the time they finished, Evelyn's head throbbed, but they had a roadmap to stabilize Delaney and Sons in the short term. She rose, smoothing her blouse. Everyone, thank you. We have a lot of work ahead, but at least we're united. As they filed out, Daniel lingered. I heard about Ethan's visit to your house today. How's Andrew holding up? She mustered a sad smile. He's hurt and confused, but I think he'll be okay. I just have to be there for him. Which reminds me, I need to get home soon. I can't bury myself here every night. Daniel patted her arm. You're doing great. Evelyn, keep your guard up, but don't forget your life beyond this building. That's the key to surviving corporate wars. His words stayed with her as she closed her office door behind him. Yes, she was CEO, but she was also a mother, a woman, a person who had just lost her marriage in the ugliest way possible. Balancing both roles would test every ounce of strength she had, but she wasn't about to let Delaney and Sons or Andrew down. That night, after a quiet dinner at home with Andrew, Evelyn retreated to the study. She booted up her laptop to catch up on emails and found one from an unfamiliar sender with a subject line that read, "You've been warned." A trickle of dread crept through her as she clicked it open. Inside, a brief message, "Retract your accusations or Andrew pays the price." Attached was a single photo Andrew leaving his school, taken earlier that day. The angle suggested someone had been watching him closely, too closely. Evelyn's stomach twisted, fury and terror mixing. She immediately forwarded the email to Daniel. She grabbed her phone, dialing him. Daniel, we have a threat against Andrew. Sent anonymously, but I bet it's connected to Ethan or Ron's associates. They attached a picture of him outside school. Daniel swore under his breath. Send me everything. I'll have my team trace the IP, though they've probably used a proxy. I'll also beef up security around Andrew. We won't let anything happen to him. Evelyn's voice shook with anger. They're trying to intimidate me into dropping the charges, but it's not my call anymore. It's the board and the authorities. They must know that. Daniel huffed. Bullies and criminals rarely think logically. They're desperate to scare you. But let me be clear, they won't touch Andrew. My people will keep an eye on him 24/7 if needed. She thanked him, ending the call. Her hands trembled as she closed the email. She could handle corporate backstabbing, but threatening her child crossed a line she couldn't forgive. A wave of nausea hit, recalling Grace's assault in the parking garage. Now, the stakes felt even higher. Forcing herself to stay calm, she set her phone aside and paced the room. Think logically, she told herself. The best way to protect Andrew was to continue exposing the fraud, ensuring these criminals had nowhere to run. If they were brazen enough to send threats, they might already be on law enforcement radar. She needed to contact Detective Moore, a local investigator Richard recommended for corporate crimes. The more official scrutiny on these individuals, the less freedom they'd have to harass her. She picked up her phone again, dialing Detective Moore's number. After a few rings, a deep, gravelly voice answered. She introduced herself and explained the situation briefly, without disclosing confidential corporate details. Send me the email and attached photo, Moore said in a clipped tone. This is a direct threat against a minor. We can open an official investigation. We'll also coordinate with your private security so we're not stepping on each other's toes. Evelyn exhaled, feeling a semblance of relief. At least now the authorities were formally involved. After the call, she forwarded everything to Moore and CC'd Daniel. She then locked her laptop, heading upstairs to check on Andrew, who was doing homework in his bedroom. He had his earbuds in, nodding to some music. When he looked up, she offered him a reassuring smile, trying not to let her fear show. Just wanted to say goodnight, she said softly. I love you. Andrew, sensing her tension, took out an earbud. I love you too. Mom, everything okay? She managed a short nod. Yeah, just wanted to be sure you're okay. He pressed his lips together, then shrugged in that teenage way. I'm fine, just tired. She patted his shoulder, then retreated, forcing herself not to hover. We will be fine, she told herself, echoing Andrew's phrase. But as she turned off the hallway lights, that threatening email loomed in her mind. Someone was determined to make them suffer. She vowed she wouldn't let fear dictate her decisions, even if it meant doubling security around her child. Sunday morning came with a new round of headlines, dissecting every angle of the Delaney and Sons scandal. Evelyn woke early and decided to escape the house for a run through the neighborhood, hoping the physical exertion would clear her mind. She left Andrew sleeping soundly, texting Daniel to confirm a security detail would watch the house during her jog. She took off at a steady pace, the brisk air biting at her lungs. Each footstep pounded out some of the tension gripping her chest. Trees swayed overhead, and a few neighbors waved. She waved back, though she suspected they might be whispering about the scandal. Still, running gave her a brief illusion of normalcy. Her route took her by the local park, a quiet spot at this early hour. She slowed, spotting an old wooden bench. Memories flickered. She and Ethan once sat there, discussing financial theories. She'd teased him about diversifying his skill set. He teased her about how she could out-analyze any accountant. That memory felt distant, as if from a past life. Stepping off the path, she caught her breath and seated herself on the bench. Her phone chimed a message from Detective Moore. We traced the email to a public Wi-Fi in Chicago. No direct link yet, but we have leads. No sightings of Carter leaving the country yet. She typed back, Thank you. Let me know if you find anything else. Tucking her phone away, she gazed at the empty playground, letting the run's endorphins soothe her. The question always lurking at the edge of her mind resurfaced. Could this have ended differently if she'd confronted Ethan sooner? Perhaps if she'd noticed early signs of his corruption. She could have stopped it before it snowballed. But regrets wouldn't help now. She had to deal with the consequences in real time. She resumed her jog, circling back toward her neighborhood. As she passed a quiet cul-de-sac, a black SUV with tinted windows cruised slowly by, giving her a jolt of alarm. Daniel had mentioned using a black SUV for security, but this one had an unfamiliar plate. She kept her pace, heart pounding, forcing herself not to appear rattled. The SUV turned a corner and disappeared, possibly just a neighbor's vehicle, but in her heightened state, everything felt ominous. By the time she returned home, sweaty and breathless, Andrew was awake, rummaging in the fridge. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, retrieving orange juice. She mustered a smile. "Morning, ready for a day of doing whatever teenagers do on Sundays." He shrugged. "I guess. Might hang out with friends. Unless I have a security guard following me, too." She frowned. "Actually, yes, we do have someone discreetly watching. It's for your safety." He groaned. "This is so messed up." She set down her keys and water bottle. "I know, and I'm sorry, but until we're sure whoever threatened us is caught, we have to be careful." Andrew's shoulders slumped. "Okay, fine." Then, in a smaller voice, he asked, "Dad wouldn't hurt me, would he?" Her throat constricted. "No, I don't believe so, but the people he worked with, Ron, or others might be more dangerous. This is just precaution." Andrew nodded, eyes flickering with fear. "Do you think Dad's really gone for good?" Evelyn wished she had a comforting answer. "I don't know, but if he did flee, we'll find out soon enough." They stood in awkward silence, the shadow of Ethan's betrayal casting a gloom over their Sunday. Evelyn gently squeezed Andrew's arm. "We'll get through this, I promise." As she headed for the shower, she prayed her promise wouldn't be broken by any new disaster lurking on the horizon. By Monday morning, Evelyn was back in Delaney and Sons' boardroom, this time to present a formal recovery and reinforcement plan to the full board. The table was filled with serious faces: Marjorie Hyatt, Morrison, Florence King, the external auditor, and others who represented major shareholders. Richard Delaney sat off to the side, no longer CEO, but still an elder statesman of the organization. A projector screen displayed slides summarizing the financial shortfall, the newly discovered older anomalies, and the proposed measures to prevent future breaches. Evelyn spoke calmly, projecting confidence she barely felt. "We estimate the total loss may reach $35 million, but we're optimistic about freezing a significant portion still in Swiss accounts. Meanwhile, we'll restructure the CFO position with tighter oversight and cross-approvals." Marjorie leaned in, brow furrowed. "And you'll serve as interim CFO, too." Evelyn nodded, temporarily. "Yes, with Grace Nakamura as acting chief accountant. Once the company stabilizes, we'll hire a permanent CFO. I'm interviewing candidates. We need a transparent, ethical leader in that role." Morrison tapped his pen on the table. "What about the leadership vacuum at COO Ron's departure also left a gap in operational management?" Evelyn clicked to the next slide. "I propose shifting some of Ron's responsibilities to existing department heads, each of whom I trust. Then we can identify an internal candidate to step into the COO role within 6 months. Our priority is ensuring no single individual can manipulate the system again." The board members exchanged glances. Some seemed satisfied, others cautious. Finally, Florence cleared her throat. "I assume you're prepared for the external PR challenges. The press is calling this a corporate meltdown." Evelyn paused, weighing her words. "Yes, we're implementing a crisis communications strategy, led by a public relations firm. Our message is straightforward: a few bad actors exploited the system, and we responded decisively to protect the company. We'll highlight our swift action and emphasize Delaney and Sons' core values: integrity and community." She flicked the presentation off, folding her hands. That concludes my briefing. I'm open to questions. Marjorie broke the silence. I appreciate your thoroughness. You've stepped into a challenging role under tragic circumstances, Evelyn, but I want to commend you for tackling this head on. She glanced around. I think the board shares that sentiment. Several heads nodded in agreement. Morrison let out a breath. I'm still shocked Ethan Carter did this, but better we root out corruption now than let it fester. Richard finally spoke, voice subdued. Evelyn has my full support. I trust her judgment, and I'm confident she'll guide Delaney and Sons into its next chapter with the integrity my parents instilled in me. A wave of emotion swelled in Evelyn's chest at his words. After a few more questions, the board voted unanimously to adopt her plan. It was an official endorsement of her leadership, a vital step in stabilizing the company. She thanked them all, feeling a sense of guarded triumph. As they adjourned, Marjorie lingered, murmuring, Remember, if you need anything legally or personally, reach out. This fight isn't over yet. There might be lawsuits from shareholders who feel betrayed, or more threats if Ethan has allies left. Stay vigilant. Evelyn nodded, exhaustion tugging at her. Thank you, I will. She watched the board members file out. Richard gave her a paternal smile, then followed them. She remained behind, momentarily alone in the quiet room. Over the last 2 weeks, her life had upended in a way she could never have foreseen. The cost was immense, personally and professionally, but Delaney and Sons was on firmer ground. For the employees and for Andrew, she'd walk this path no matter how perilous it might still become. As she exited the boardroom, her phone buzzed with a call from Detective Moore. She quickly ducked into an empty hallway alcove to take it. Detective, any news? His voice came through steady, authoritative. We've been combing through financial records tied to Ethan Carter. We have credible intel he's trying to access additional offshore accounts, possibly to finance an extended stay abroad. Any chance you know about a contact named Helios Advisors? Evelyn's heart lurched. Helios Advisors was the Swiss firm mentioned in the earlier records. Yes, that's the primary shell entity he used. Are you close to freezing it? Moore sighed. We're working with Swiss authorities, but it takes time, and he's cunning. If he's physically in Zurich, he could shuffle accounts around quickly. Best we can do is pressure the banks to comply. She pressed a hand to her forehead. Understood. Keep me posted. He paused. One more thing, there's chatter on some financial message boards about a bounty for anyone who can discredit Evelyn Carter. Might be empty talk, but watch your back. Evelyn stiffened. A bounty? That's extreme. People with money and grudges can be desperate, Moore said. We'll keep digging. He ended the call, leaving Evelyn reeling. So Ethan or his allies were willing to pay for dirt on her, presumably to smear her publicly or pressure her to drop the case. She walked briskly to her office, dialing Daniel next. After relaying the detective's findings, she asked, Should I be doing something else to protect myself? The bounty thing is unnerving. Daniel's tone was grim. We can increase your personal security detail, and I'll see what I can find about who's posting the bounty. If it's on the dark web, they might remain anonymous, but we can try. Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut. This is insane. I've never been a criminal or a spy. I'm just trying to run a company ethically. I know, Daniel said gently, but these people are cornered. They're lashing out. That means we stay the course, don't back down, and they'll run out of options. She thanked him and hung up. Sinking into her office chair, a fresh wave of anger churned in her gut. She refused to be bullied into submission. Her immediate impulse was to hold a press conference, double down on the truth, and publicly shame anyone trying to intimidate her. But cooler heads prevailed. Marjorie and Richard would advise measured responses, ensuring the ongoing investigation wasn't compromised. With a sigh, she opened her email. A flagged message from Grace. All new hires flagged for background checks, per your request. We found two suspicious applicants for our IT department ties to Ron's network. Evelyn's blood ran cold. They're still trying to infiltrate. She typed a swift reply. Reject them immediately. Forward details to Daniel. The walls felt like they were closing in, but she resolved to stand her ground. She'd faced Ethan in the boardroom, exposed his crimes, and taken control of Delaney and Sons. She wouldn't let fear or threats unravel what she'd built. Drawing on every ounce of strength, she focused on the day's tasks, determined to protect the company from unseen forces still circling like vultures. Wednesday dawned with a glimmer of hope. The Swiss authorities sent word that they had frozen multiple Helios advisors' accounts linked to Ethan Carter, preventing further withdrawals. Evelyn felt a surge of relief at least part of the stolen funds might be recoverable. She gathered Richard, Marjorie, and the legal team for a video conference with the Swiss investigators, hashing out details of how soon the money could be repatriated. It might take weeks, even months, to fully trace, one Swiss official said in slightly accented English, but we are confident Mr. Carter cannot easily move these assets. After the call ended, Evelyn let out a long breath. This is good. He can't bankroll whatever he was planning overseas. Richard nodded. Yes, it's a victory. Not the end, but progress. In the midst of this cautious optimism, her assistant David stepped in, face drawn. I just got word from security downstairs Sophia Carter is here, insisting on seeing you. Evelyn tensed. Ethan's mother. She'd already tried intimidation once. Richard frowned. Shall I handle her? Evelyn shook her head. No, I'll do it. This is between me and her. Let's see what new threat she's bringing. 5 minutes later, she was sitting in a small meeting room off the lobby, waiting. Sophia swept in, immaculate as ever. Her expression was pinched with anger. So, she began, voice dripping with disdain. You've succeeded in destroying my son's reputation, freezing his accounts, and turning the world against him. Evelyn folded her hands calmly. He destroyed his own reputation by embezzling funds. Sophia's eyes flashed. You could have saved him, quietly handled this, but no, you had to parade it before the board and the media. Evelyn leaned forward, tension thrumming in her temples. If I'd stayed quiet, the company would have collapsed under financial fraud. Thousands of employees could have lost their livelihoods. That's not an option. Sophia's lips compressed. Perhaps, but you've turned my grandson against his father. Evelyn's voice rose a fraction. Ethan turned Andrew against him by lying and threatening. I've only told Andrew the truth. A fleeting flicker of hesitation crossed Sophia's features, but she pressed on. Don't you see? You'll regret this. Even if you remain CEO, your name is tarnished. People whisper about how you married Ethan just to worm your way into this position. Despite the sting, Evelyn held steady. I married Ethan because I loved him. I never expected he'd choose fraud and deceit. Sophia's composure cracked. Tears glistened in her eyes. He's my only son, she said shakily. I can't bear to see him disgraced. Evelyn softened, remembering that beneath the sharp words and manipulative tactics, this was a mother hurting for her child. I'm sorry for your pain, Sophia, but he left us no alternative. Sophia swallowed hard, dabbing her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was cold again. Then I suppose there's nothing more to say. I'll tell Ethan to expect a vicious custody battle if you try to keep Andrew away from him. Anger flared in Evelyn's chest. Andrew is nearly 17. He'll decide who he wants to live with, and you know he wants nothing to do with these threats." Sophia glared. "We'll see," she said, turning to go. At the door, she paused. "I hope you're proud of yourself. You got what you wanted. I only pray Andrew doesn't end up hating you for ripping his father from him." Evelyn bit back a retort. Instead, she let Sophia leave. The moment the door clicked shut, she sagged in her chair, exhaustion and frustration colliding. She was so tired of these confrontations. But as she rubbed her eyes, a quiet resolve settled over her again. She wouldn't compromise on this. If Ethan dared to pursue custody or legal battles, she would fight with the truth on her side. Andrew deserved a stable life, even if that meant cutting ties with a father who chose corruption over family. Friday brought a sense of turning the corner. Evelyn's recovery plan was rolling out smoothly new compliance officers, tighter authorizations, and employee morale sessions. The team leaders reported that clients were staying put, reassured by the swift leadership changes. Media coverage had begun pivoting from scandal to praise for Delaney and Sons' transparency in addressing the crisis. That morning, she chaired her first major executive meeting without any lingering doubts about her authority. Grace sat to her left. Daniel briefly joined via conference call, and department heads lined the table. They discussed cost-saving measures, plans to reinvest in key R&D areas, and a push to restore the educational initiatives that Ethan had all but gutted. By the time they wrapped, the mood felt almost optimistic. After the meeting, as people dispersed, Grace lingered, excitement lighting her eyes. "I've got great news. Some of the funds in Helios Advisors' accounts have already been returned to Delaney and Sons. It's a fraction of the total, but a start $3 million. Evelyn let out a breath. "That's wonderful. Every recovered dollar helps." Grace handed over the confirmation printouts. "We should issue a brief statement to the press. Show that progress is being made." Evelyn agreed, mentally drafting the release. It would boost public confidence further. "See? We're clawing the money back. Delaney and Sons remains strong." Her phone rang. This time, the caller ID showed Detective Moore. She picked up warily. "Detective, I've got an update. We have reason to believe Ethan Carter did fly to Zurich 2 days ago, just before the accounts froze. Our counterparts there say he arrived, but tracking his movements is tricky. He may have changed locations." Evelyn's pulse quickened. He's likely trying to move or hide the funds. But if the Swiss froze them, he can't do much. Right? Moore paused. Correct. He might try to set up accounts elsewhere, Caymans. Singapore? Who knows? We'll keep digging. Just wanted you to know he's out of the country. She thanked him and hung up, relief mingling with apprehension. If Ethan was gone, that reduced the immediate personal threat, but increased the risk of a drawn-out international chase. Nevertheless, for now, the main worry was him trying to sabotage from afar. Later that evening, she drove Andrew to a friend's house for a low-key gathering. On the ride, she gauged his mood, searching for signs of lingering distress. He still seemed quiet, but she could tell a weight was off his shoulders. "Doing okay?" she asked, pulling up to the curb in a leafy suburban street. He nodded, fiddling with his phone. "Yeah, I'm just adjusting. Everyone at school knows Dad's in trouble, but I'm dealing." She reached out, ruffling his hair. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." Andrew offered a tentative smile. "Thanks, Mom. And I'm proud of you, for standing up for what's right." His words struck her with an unexpected emotional force. "That means a lot," she said softly, throat tightening. "Have fun tonight." Watching him head up the walkway, she felt a surge of hope. Maybe they could heal from this, step by step. She eased away from the curb, headlights sweeping over tree-lined driveways, thinking of the future. Delaney and Sons was stabilizing. Andrew was finding his equilibrium. If Ethan stayed overseas, perhaps the worst was behind them. But beneath her cautious optimism, Evelyn knew there were still legal battles ahead, as well as the heartbreak of finalizing a divorce from the man she once admired. She just prayed that with each passing day, the wounds would scab over, replaced by something stronger, a sense of victory for truth, a new foundation for the life she and Andrew deserved. 2 weeks later, the sun shone brightly over Denver as Evelyn stood at the large glass windows of the Delaney and Sons' top floor, gazing down at the bustling city streets. The office had been redecorated, slightly fresh flowers in a vase, a few personal photos of her and Andrew on the desk. Gone were the remnants of old CEO portraits. It was time for a new era. She reviewed the morning's briefing. The Swiss had confirmed another portion of funds frozen, totaling nearly $10 million recovered. Ron Mathers's legal team had indicated he might plead guilty in exchange for a lenient sentence. Meanwhile, Ethan was still abroad, probably in hiding, but was fast running out of places to stash illicit money. A gentle knock sounded. Richard Delaney stepped in, smiling softly. "Are you ready for the company-wide webcast today?" Evelyn would address all Delaney and Sons employees around the globe, marking her first quarterly town hall as CEO. She turned, confidence shining in her eyes. "Yes, let's do it." They headed to the broadcast studio on the 20th floor, where cameras and microphones were set. Employees worldwide tuned in via video link, eager for the new CEO's message. As Evelyn took her place under the bright lights, she imagined all those faces watching, some from production lines, some from international offices, some from home, families by their side. The thought filled her with purpose. A producer counted down, and at 0, she smiled into the camera. "Good morning, Delaney and Sons family. I'm Evelyn Carter, and I stand before you with gratitude for your support during these tumultuous weeks. Because of your dedication and resilience, we are emerging stronger." She went on to outline the progress recovered funds, new compliance measures, increased employee engagement programs, and a renewed commitment to the legacy of innovation and integrity first championed by Richard's parents. While she didn't dive into specifics of Ethan's whereabouts or Ron's potential plea, she left no doubt that the company was under principled leadership now. "Every department has stepped up to help us address challenges. You have my promise that transparency remains at the core of how we do business. We'll keep you informed, and we'll work together to shape our future." She paused, letting her sincerity resonate. The foundation of Delaney and Sons has always been people, our shared belief in doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Thank you for standing with me as we uphold that belief. When she finished, applause broke out in the small studio, and she knew it was mirrored across countless sites. She exhaled, stepping away from the camera. Richard caught her eye, giving a nod of approval that spoke volumes. "Well done, daughter," his look seemed to say, after the broadcast. Grace rushed up, practically beaming. The chat is exploding with positive feedback. People feel heard and inspired. This is a huge morale boost. Evelyn felt warmth in her chest. That's exactly what we need right now, in that moment. Andrew sent a text, "Saw your live broadcast at school viral clips. Ha ha, proud of you, Mom." She smiled, blinking away the threat of tears. This was the culmination of her secret training and the agony of exposure, standing here, fully recognized for her intellect and leadership, no longer hidden behind anyone's shadow. Though Ethan's legal reckoning might still loom, the immediate crisis was contained. Delaney and Sons was on track to rebuild. And she was nobody's just a housewife anymore. She was the CEO, a mother, a woman who had weathered betrayal and come out determined to honor the legacy her father figure entrusted to her. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating the polished floors and the flowers on her desk. Evelyn Carter stood tall, ready to guide the company forward. She had chosen the path of integrity and truth and, in doing so, found the strength she never knew she possessed. In the aftermath, as the smoke cleared and the echoes of betrayal finally faded, the silence revealed a truth deeper than victory or defeat. What had begun as a desperate fight for justice ended as something far more complex, a quiet reckoning of sacrifice, trust, and identity. In the fire of battle, illusions burned away, leaving behind only what was real strength born from pain, clarity forged from chaos. Yet the cost had been high loyalties shattered, bonds severed forever, and scars that would never fully heal. Each choice made had carved deep lines, changing destinies in ways no one had anticipated. We often believe that triumph erases sorrow, but it merely stands beside it, a silent witness to the price we've paid. Tonight, amid the stillness that comes after a storm, only questions linger, soft but insistent. As you reflect on your own journey, on battles fought and truths uncovered, consider this. In the end, when you've lost everything you thought defined you, who are you then? What remains when the dust settles and you stand quietly, alone beneath the stars? Perhaps the answer isn't in what's been lost, but in what's finally been found.